there.
How's it? Okay, so just let's do a quick introduction so we know who we all are. Skulk Enslin is the general manager of Fezula. I think most of us know the property. Ian Morrison in the striped shirt is sales manager of Brovos Rail. And Karen Carter owns a number of guest houses in France. She's got 2 in the Dordogne Valley and 1 across in Signos. And she'll tell you that Signos is close to Hossegor, if you know that area. So it's quite a diverse, and very close to the Spanish border. So you're a diverse group, and thank you very much for joining us. And hopefully, in this conversation, we'll be able to just kind of try and peer into the future and get an idea of what the tourism industry might look like, and perhaps how do we have to change our business models to cater for the changes. So, yeah, thank you. Welcome.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Scott. We've had the benefit of chatting before you came in, so we've got to get to know each other quite well. Maybe you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you've only been at Fezula, was it last year that you came on board? And then, of course, this whole thing hit.
Exactly. I started off at Fezula October last year. So really just finding my feet at the end of season. And a property that was going through quite a bit of turmoil because it was 18 months prior, it was bought out by Village and Life from the managing agent changed from Hilton to Village and Life. Okay. And Hilton did take the sort of most senior staff with them, all the good ones when they left, as you do when you're Hilton.
Sure.
And Village and Life's approach is a little bit off the cuff. They do things in a strange way. I'm still settling into their unusual, unconventional way of managing properties. But they sort of left the property without a general manager for 12 months.
Wow.
Okay.
The idea is to let old habits die. It was a deliberate to sort of let things simmer and then build up. One of the first conversations I had with the new owner, 2 weeks after starting, for 4 years the property was in business rescue. So maintenance was definitely lacking, and walking him around, showing him the property, saying, "Can we spend some money, please?" He said to me, "I bought a bankrupt hotel, and if I spend 100 million on redoing the interior, I will sit with a luxury bankrupt hotel. I will only start spending money."
Not something you wanted to hear, no doubt.
Exactly, but it made sense. You know, his philosophy is fix the model. If the business model works, then I will spend the money to go with it. And he's sort of stepped up his game immensely since then, because we have come up with a model that seems to be working. And then, of course, COVID happened, and that was a bit of a challenge. Again, he's a bit of a visionary, Maria Brink. It was very unusual in how Village and Life he was really preempting a lot of what was going to come. Okay. So we managed pretty well. By the end of January, we had systems in place on many fronts. Simple things like the doors that leads into the public bathrooms. He said, remove them. And we're like, what? Which is a reality on door handles, touching door handles going in and out in the space. Especially because by January, February, we still had about 70% of our clientele were foreigners traveling in and out of the country. So we were sort of right there in the forefront, and to try and we've got 160 people in-house and staff that has got no concept of what the reality is going to be to try and mitigate a new way. So we managed to, by early Feb, we had our first case of guests that tested positive. Okay. And we sort of, when isolation was still a bit of unusual, we managed to keep them separate, not get hysteria from the staff side, keep the media away, which one of the other golf properties in George didn't do so well. And that effectively stopped their business completely. Where we managed to stay open and keep going and not get anybody to actually contract the virus from them. And they were here for a week before I left.
All right. So, okay. So I guess in dealing with this beast, COVID, that one of the first things that you guys had to deal with was probably just safety issues. I mean, both from a physical perspective for yourselves and your staff, but also in terms of guest perception.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Early on, there was a sense that the tourists didn't really see the importance yet in the beginning.
Yes.
There was definitely a feeling both from the general staff and from the guests, but why do you stop the breakfast buffet? The realities were difficult in the beginning to sort of settle.
Yeah. Yeah, I was in Knysna just before the announcement. And I mean, down the waterfront, everything was going on as per normal, albeit there was a bit of sanitizing of tables and things like that, full of foreigners at that stage. And then I spent a few nights in Cape Town, and I was in Franschhoek when the announcement came, and had to pedal back home pretty quickly, you know, because I think we had 2 days or so. And we had wine to stock up on, you know. Karen, I mean, tell us what's happening in France at the moment. You guys are open again. Unrestricted.
Okay, here's the scary thing right now is that, okay, so they opened up, but it's always people. I mean, it's like the blooming Parisians have to go and pretty much have put a bit of a problem, thrown a problem into the mix in that they're full out doing whatever they want, and as are some of the other areas where, now we are seeing a slow increase in the virus. I mean, the Dordogne region went from nothing, and we're now at 10 cases. So the new thing now is anybody coming to France and then returning in terms of the UK, which is ironic because they're also not behaving. You've now got to go into 2 weeks quarantine, which is not good for my business because I had a massive shift where all the Brits were coming and then they didn't want to do the quarantine thing. So they canceled outright. I had no one to be completely rebooked by the French. So the French will rebook, but I'm sitting with 2 bookings that are from the UK, and I'm just actually regretting it because I'm waiting for that email. They don't want to come, you know.
Yeah.
And to rebook now at this last minute, it's going to be quite difficult to do that. But anyway, so I think that as you said, Scott, people just don't realize the impact of the disease or the virus. Macron has now initiated this thing where you cannot go to markets or wherever without a mask. You have to wear a mask, otherwise they're fine. And I promise you, the gendarmes are all over the place. That's the police, and they are watching. So, I mean, you can go to one of these local markets, and it's full of foreigners. And unless they're wearing masks, you know, you've got to understand it can get passed on, basically. So they're quite good. Everything is opened up. You can go to a restaurant, but you walk in with a mask on and you sanitize. You sit down, you can take your mask off and then have your meal, but you put it back on to pay and leave. So the controls are slowly getting into place and people are actually starting to behave. But it's the bigger centers. I mean, I saw it when I was in London as well. I mean, people are just doing whatever, you know. But they need to realize you can't carry on like that until this thing is actually under some kind of control. So going forward, guys, this is not going away in a hurry because we're already looking at a small wave, you know, second wave here in France. Our cases are now at 2,700, and you don't want that. I don't know what the UK is. I haven't had a chance to look yet, but no, it's actually it's very scary. But at least the death rates, you know, subside. It's not as great as it was, but you don't want to get to that situation where it is. So you've got to have enforced rules and regulations. I don't know how South Africa do that, because it's a bit of a free for all in South Africa, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, we're sitting at about 300 deaths a day at the moment, you know, although they say the peak of the number of infections has passed. But I absolutely agree with you that this thing isn't going away quickly, you know, until there's a vaccine. I really don't see, and I think Ian and I were having a conversation earlier, and I mean, I think we're both in agreement that we're going to be wearing masks for a year or two, you know, possibly. Ian, I mean, you've been left out, so let's just kind of, I'm going to come back to Karen, because I was very interested how you managed to pivot from the UK market to the French market. So we'll hold that thought. But Ian, you guys have got a very unique constraint in that you're essentially a hotel on wheels. 35 suites, is that right, more or less?
Yeah, 36 our maximum suites, so 72 our ideal amount of packs on the train.
And huge overheads for that train to even leave the station. So for you guys, you know, you can't, if Karen in one of her guest houses has a guest house or two empty, she can still fill the other one, as terrible as paying the bonds and all the rest might be, and Skulk yourself as well. But for you, Ian, you need X number of packs before you actually leave the station.
Yeah, and also we're not allowed to trade until we reach stage 1, so our business is closed. And then also another situation we have is that 95% of our business is based on inbound tourism. So we are relying on our international guests coming in. They're the people that have got the money to travel on our train. And then coupled with the fact that our booking patterns are 12 to 18 months in advance to be able to get space to travel on our train, has also created a bit of a problem, because now obviously we're trying to defer bookings from 2020, those COVID bookings, into 2021, and that space is already tight. So I agree 100%. I really don't believe that. I mean, I do 4 or 5 international trips a year going into my markets. But the thing is that I don't believe that I will travel on an airplane for the next few years without wearing a face mask. I just think that will become a way of life. And social distancing will be something that we will have to prove that takes place in our business. And I think we're all going to have to try and justify to our passengers or guests that we have changed, that COVID has taught us something, and we are more aware that what COVID did to us. So, part of our leadership team, we, brainstorming and doing operational changes into what we can do in our business. And the one person spoke up and said, yeah, but once we hit level 1, we'll be fine. I said, no, if we don't go and explain to our agents that, that we are working differently, I don't believe we'll get that travel confidence. And until such time as people can see that we have taken COVID seriously, and we've implemented change, and we're not going to be the train that we were before, I don't think that we will get close to the numbers that we want. So I think they need to see the change first before people be confident to make our bookings. Our biggest market is the UK market. They're a conservative market in its true form. And the revenue that I get, which is the UK is my market, and our second biggest market is the USA, but the revenue from the UK is twice as much as the US. So there's a huge gap in that revenue. And based on the way that the English handled the whole Brexit thing, breaks went on, people stopped booking holidays. And I think our UK market is going to take a little bit of a strain before we actually get back. So I really think that for the next couple of years, we're going to battle to get the number of English passengers onto our trains that we've always had over the years. So yeah, it's I just think that everything that we look at, you know, is an obstacle, but at the same time we're trying to create it into an opportunity as well. But it's yeah, a very difficult. Our train looks, so our passengers are also senior in age. They all are mature people, retired, 90% of them. And so that coupled with the fact that worldwide, with, you know, the knock in the economy, you know, people obviously are getting reduced return on investments, and these people live off of dividends. So that's going to be another reason why people may slow down on international travel to a country like South Africa. I don't know whether we're going to impose self-isolation periods once our borders are relaxed. So we'll have to, you know, see how that happens. So yeah, it's interesting times, but yet very scary times at the same time.
Mm.
Yeah. Your Brits are very afraid to travel. The thing I'm finding, because my primary market actually is pretty much now those retirees, and they get in their car and they drive down, because all the, you know, the kiddies and that sort of family orientated crowd have gone by the end of August. So September, October, I have all my retirees. They come and they enjoy good food and they go walking, etc., etc. They just don't want to go anywhere. They're too afraid. So there's another problem. So it's not only that. It's not, you know, it's everything. So yeah, I mean, my new target market, which I want to start working on this week, I mean, because of the quarantine, the 2-week quarantine, a lot of my yuppie, what I call the millennials, are looking for time out. You know, they're sick and tired of sitting at home and working at home. And my new market now will be to bring them to France, and they can come and basically quarantine and still enjoy the region. But, you know, I don't know whether that would be, you know, that kind of market you could tap into for your yuppie market. I don't know. But it is the retirees that want to come and relax and enjoy a train journey, you know.
And they're the ones that can afford it. The millennials, yes, there is disposable income there, but you know, when it comes to our train looks the part of that bygone era, you know, so we're more of a traditional looking train. I don't want to say the word old fashioned, because there's a certain look that goes with it. So we attract the more senior people in age. So we also at the situation now we're going, oh, maybe we need a new look. You know, if we maybe a little bit more modern, contemporary, will we attract that younger market? Because that's definitely something. I mean, I've got 7 trains I need to fill. You know, we've got 7 trains out at any given stage. We own 2 train companies, Rovos Rail and Shongololo Express. Shongololo doing mainly longer journeys, 12 and 15-day journeys. During lockdown, we've also now put together another 3 journeys. So we're looking at probably having 8 trains out. We've got a license to have 100 workers at our site in Pretoria at our own private station, where they are busy refurbishing carriages as we speak, building our 8th train, and also at the same time do maintenance. You know, you're always having to worry about, is the coach going to be out at the time that you have to lift it and do maintenance on the bogie, or, you know, can we, you know, hold that coach back? So we're doing, you know, we're spending money with no revenue coming in. We haven't had revenue since March, you know, so it's quite scary. And we've got, you know, 450 people on payroll, you know, and so it is very tough to try and juggle all of that, and we're still spending money on maintenance. So yeah, but
to try and aim for that young market, because I can guarantee you they all go on holiday. I know for a fact. I've got 2 sitting in London, and boy, they plan their holidays. You know, if the airfares, which worries me, are the airfares going to become exorbitant? Because if they were affordable and people could come for a 2-week holiday and do that kind of thing that you're offering, I think, you know, the yuppie crowd will buy into it if it was affordable. But you see, I don't know.
Right, Ian? Am I right? A 2-week trip on your train, about R500,000 rand.
Yeah, if you had to take all the trips on in general, you're looking at about 12,000 South African rand per person per night for a one-way journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, so if you're looking at a Dar es Salaam train or roller trip, you're looking at about
I mean, it's an incredible experience, but you're also in a narrow tube. I think your dining room is probably okay, except you've got a lot of staff, and your drinks car at the back and observation car might be a bit tight in a post-COVID world. I mean, and the other thing that I experienced on Rovers Rail, which I thought was quite amazing and enjoyed at the time, is that they discourage the use of electronics. So your cell phones are not allowed in the dining room. They're not allowed in the drinks car. There's a move away from that and kind of adopting this old-fashioned leisurely thing. But entertainment is actually a big part of the hospitality industry. And suddenly now, when you can't interact with people up close, and there's no hugging and there's wearing of masks, do you bring something like that back? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, it's something that we spoke about, and it's something that we haven't as a leadership team spoken about. So it definitely needs to be addressed. The fact that a moving train and worldwide, our train sets travel the furthest distance than any other train operator. So if you look at a Belmont or you do a comparison against it, the amount of distance that we cover on any of our journeys is greater than our opposition. So there's a lot of traveling time where other operators will travel and then they'll be stationed for 4 or 5 hours, and then they'll travel a bit further, where we whilst we have excursions, we do travel vast distances. So and doing that, you're going through areas where cell phone signal is going to be interrupted. So we've gone over the years by going, do we entertain a service or provide a service that is not 100% reliable, when you've got Europeans that when the bus shelter says that there's a bus that arrives every 5 minutes, it arrives, and there's an expectation that that's going to take place. And now we say, sometimes there may be Wi-Fi, sometimes, depending on if we're behind a mountain, it doesn't go down well with our passengers. So, we made the call that no service be provided on the train. However, during excursions, we'll say to guests, we're in Monkiesfontein, you're more than welcome to go sit at the Lord Milner Hotel and, use the Wi-Fi facility there. And at the end of before we depart, the train manager will go and pay, a bill with the hotel for using, some of their facilities. But, to try and change who we are as a business, our identity, is that the right thing, or we just, I hear what Karen's saying about the millennials. That is a market that we really haven't been able to crack. I think our agents that sell us and sell us well have always sold to a certain niche market. And as the marketing team, definitely have to chat to my team and see what can we do about going out and trying to attract a different type of clientele that may want to do something. Steam trains is something that you don't see very often in South Africa anymore, and yet we haul our people in our yard and out of our yard using steam. So to try and celebrate that bygone era, and it's a huge expense to our business, because it takes 24 hours of a steam train standing, and get the enough combustion to be able to move the heavy locomotive. So based on that, it's a huge expense. So and we don't want to change that. So if you start changing the face of who we are, will that change our business? But then maybe these unprecedented times are forcing us into re-looking at our business and going, maybe there is space for a modern contemporary train, where we always say, we the green train, so we are more traditional, where the blue train is more your modern contemporary type of look. And we've kind of justified each other's existence by defining, our style. But it is a hard one. Our owner is 74 years old, still actively involved in our business, an astute business person. Got a huge amount of respect for the guy. it has kept everybody in payroll, and he's really juggling stuff where, you know, after 32 years of being in business, you know, last thing you want to do is make yourself vulnerable because you're keeping all of your team on board, and yet he's doing that. And he's got a very loyal workforce, so we'll just try and make it work.
We'll pick up on the change thing just now. Skulk, I want to cross to you because you're quite innovative.
Well, the first thing we did, sort of during lockdown as well, we kept the maintenance team on site to sort of do refurb as much as possible. I was feeding them, and I realized immediately there's a need on the golf estate and the private estate next door to us, which should have theoretically been a community, but it wasn't. There was a lot of infighting. It's mainly elderly people, European and South African, with a fair amount of money. A lot of them were stuck in the country because they couldn't get back out to Europe in time. And it's people that were very scared of going to Knysna to the shops because of the virus. So I immediately started, or 2 weeks into lockdown, started with I started at the tuck shop. Baked bread and had some hot coffee available, and it took 10 days before we managed to sell 3 breads in one day, and it was like, yay, it's working. It's evolved to the point that we've got about a 300% increase month on month wow. So far. The tuck shop is now a deli. The old yoga studio, which was one of the conference facilities at Bazula, has now been turned into the deli's kitchen and space. I've got about, of the 140 people that are residing on the estate at the moment that's in the country, they're all on my mailing list for daily menus. So we sort of have a daily, and then we do dinners that we come up every week with a menu for nightly and deliver to the estate. And that's been a phenomenal success, to the point now that Knysna is starting to come up the hill to buy stuff from the deli and asking for deliveries down there. And that it's gotten us in the position that about 60% of the restaurant staff has been brought back to the property before we were allowed to operate a hotel, because we managed to sort of get them employed in just feeding the locals. It is a nice niche market that we sort of got round to exploit in a way, and it suited them. We got down to a point where we've got delivery service for their online shopping, where we sanitize the Woolies stuff for them, and then when they come in to get their bread, they pick up whatever they ordered from Woolies. Most people now just sort of send us what they wanted. We buy in as well when we buy our stuff. So that's been a success. In terms of the hotel, we've made a judgment call, re-looked at the business model and said, well, at this point, conservatively, there won't be foreign nationals coming to Knysna before October 2021, because we don't think it will happen this summer, and we don't think in winter people are just not going to travel. So we've come up with a model, and really, what is our cost per room to have somebody in the room between now and October to try and just pay staff. So we've reinvented the business model to say, on a non-profit business model until October 2021, what is it going to cost us to have people in the hotel, to be able to pay the staff and still maintain, because a big problem in a hotel like this, if it stands for 6 months empty, the geysers pack up. There's so many hardware stuff that just don't want to sit without being used. So we've launched 2 weeks ago the hotel at a once in a lifetime rate of 500 Rand per person sharing. We started off with 400 Rand. Then you get a clean room on arrival, no paperwork, just a key. Everything has got to be done and paid beforehand to minimize, keep everything as COVID friendly as possible. You get a room, no cleaning service, no turn down. There's a microwave and cutlery in the room, and cleaning materials, and you got to look after your room for the duration of your stay, with all meals being available at the deli on a takeaway scenario. So the deli, again, we opted not at this stage to make it a sit-down environment. I've got some tables and chairs outside where you can get your takeaway breakfast and go and sit and eat it outside, or take it to the room. The same with dinners. The success we've had in the 2 weeks since we've launched it, we've sold for August and September, we've sold 450 room nights.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Okay, lovely.
Exclusively to Cape Townians. The millennials are definitely traveling. They're definitely keen, and if they know the things are in place, and we say to them beforehand, this is what it's going to be. Most people are very forgiving to say, well, okay, I'm going to make my own bed or sleep in a dirty bed for the 5 nights. At that rate, I want to come and enjoy. So there definitely seems to be a lot of room for maneuvering to get something going. And our next aim is, as soon as the provincial borders drop, to focus on Johannesburg on the same sort of focus, to really just maintain the property and maintain the valuable staff that's been with the company for years, with the building for years, and tick it through until October earliest.
Yeah, I think a big problem that most tourism businesses have is that they realize there'll come a day when this is over, and one way of cutting costs obviously is to get rid of staff, but how do you start up again after that? So I think there's a great prioritization of saying who's absolutely essential to the various businesses when this is over. And if some people choose to leave, well, that's fine, but we've got to have our core kind of staff there when things return to semblance of normality. I mean, one of the things that scares the hell out of me is that governments around the world have chosen to use lockdown as a mechanism to control this disease. Now, that precedent has been set, and governments around the world are going to use it again because it's acceptable, So I think when re-engineering our businesses and when looking at the future, we need to take this sort of stuff into account, certainly from my perspective. And I think that the business models that we need to look at need to actually go beyond just this immediate crisis, but to actually look at it and say, how is it going to help us to sustain in a world that possibly will be quite different? There's a great book, I think it's called Blue Ocean Strategy, and it talks about one of the ways of getting into uncontested market space, new market space, is by actually listing the criteria that your business has been built on currently, and then removing them one by one and saying, what if? I'll give you an example. In the early 80s, Karen, you enjoy wine, and I know you do on occasion too, there were 2 wine markets in South Africa. There was the premium wine market, and there were the cheapies. The cheapies was the Libesteins and the Paul Palais and maybe the Autumn Harvest Crackling. And then there was the premium wine market, and there was nothing in between. Stellenbosch Farmers Winery kind of looked at this, and them and distillers, they ran an organization called the Cape Wine Academy, which I think is probably still going. And the idea there was to educate people about wine and create quasi-wine snobs, but there was a limit to how far that market could grow. And then out of the blue, their clever marketing guys launched a product called Grasser. And Grasser was billed as a fun wine, something that should be shared with friends and langoustines and et cetera, and it created a whole new market, which is kind of interesting because I think we're at that stage where we've probably got to look at whole new markets for our businesses. I mean, Karen, you alluded to the millennials, to try and get them in. One of the other examples in Blue Ocean Strategy was the circus. You know, in the old days when I was a kid, we went to Boswell Wilkie Circus, and it was the same formula, the same business model. You know, there was three rings in the middle. It was always in the circus tent. You know, the price eventually went up to about 17 Rand, or I don't know what a circus costs to go to these days. And then somebody looked at that business model and said, we can do better. And Cirque du Soleil was born. And what they did was they created uncontested market space by charging a huge premium. I mean, $99 for a ticket to go to the circus. But they created a theater of experience, you know, not in a moving tent, but in these purpose-built venues. So I think, you know, if I'm looking at a post-COVID world, I think many businesses have to do that. And I've got great sense of how retail will do. But this whole hospitality industry worries me, you know, and that's why I've got you experts here for some ideas.
Well, from our perspective in France, you've got to, we can't have anything less than 24 hours between guests. I don't know what it is in South Africa.
Same here.
Yeah, so which is, and this is what I find very interesting, is that the guests coming in and the guests leaving just don't care. They'll say, no, well, you know, you originally said we can leave at 10 o'clock. No, you can't leave at 10 o'clock. We need you to leave at 9 o'clock. And no, incoming people, you can't arrive at 11 o'clock the following day, because we still got that, to have that period, because you're supposed to have 3 hours before you go in to clean. Mm-hmm. And then you got to have another period, you know, so 24 hours apart. But before you know it, you've got to have this extended period. And I'm walking around with my temperature thing, checking people before they leave. So at least we kind of have a good idea as to whether they have any kind of fever at least. And then you get all grumpy groups wanting to and shouting the odds because he wants to come in at 11 o'clock the following, you know, before you've even had a chance to finish the sterilization. That's the other thing, because then it's got to sit. So, you know, our problem is the public. And I'm not surprised the worldwide they're going, well, especially like here in Europe, they're going, well, guys, if you're not going to behave, it's quite simple. We just say either a quarantine or we say lockdown again. Because they don't care. They're just not interested in the bigger scheme of things. And that's what we're up against. Until the public get it in their heads, we're in a little bit of a predicament. You know, they really just do not care. And you have to be super strict.
What role do we have in communicating these constraints and opportunities to our potential guests or to past guests or whatever? Are you guys doing anything in that regard, Ian, Scott?
We've created like a poster where we say this is what our cleaning process entails. Our social distancing will mean this. We're looking at having to put maybe an extra dining car onto each train because like you mentioned earlier before, we are obviously on a very narrow gauge in South Africa, so our train sets are not very wide. So in a dining car, you'll have 4 seats on one side and a 2 seats on the other, where we now have to stagger and have empty tables in between that. So typically we would have a pillared dining car, which is quite a formal and grand looking dining car, and then we'll have one that what we call the wimpy, which is a little bit more informal but hardly informal when it comes to robots. But it's 2 different styles that we have on any train where the guests can decide where they want to sit. So now we're looking at having to create a reservation period, because obviously sanitization is a huge thing. So if you've got the same couple sitting at the same table, you know, day on day, the cleaning process may be easier to maintain than having fresh clients at the tables all the time. So not that you're trying to make light of the sanitization, it just obviously there's a certain amount of staff that you can have on the train. If you've got 72 guests, you probably got about 35 staff members as well. So you're looking at about a team of about 105, sometimes 108 people in total on a train, staff and passengers included. So it's quite difficult to try and juggle that. Typically for example, our Cape Town train will depart on a Friday from Cape Town, from Johannesburg, Pretoria, and arrive in Cape Town on Sunday night at 6 o'clock. That same train will then depart from Cape Town the following morning at 11 o'clock. So there goes that 24 hours in between. So we now work on a scheduled departure basis, and we publish our dates, 18 months in advance. So now that goes out the window. So now you can't get the train to go out. So, and we can't afford to have two trains stationing at the same time because you pay for parking fees, just like an aircraft would. So do you then have a second train set down there, and do we just turn the two trains around and we suck it up and we pay for parking? Then your train is vulnerable. You've got people that will, petty theft takes place. They'll break into a bar cart. They'll break a window to try to get into your bar. So there's that whole security element. Our biggest operational expense that we have in our business is what we pay the railways to operate our trains using. And you're looking at that and going, well, how is this going to, impact our business? Where you've got huge operational expenses that don't go away. And so now you can't have a second train set down there. So it's very difficult to try and look at changing the way that you models when you've published dates. So we are in a situation where we don't quite know where to from here. So we virtually, and we've changed our terms and conditions to cover COVID about 9 times in total. So every single time something comes up, we're looking at changing that. So yeah.
Schalk, over to you.
First thing I did in the model of just trying to sustain the immediate future, we split the staff into 2 cleaning teams that don't ever overlap. The idea is we preempt that somewhere along the line there will be somebody coming that makes the team sick. So by having the 2 teams, one team works and then they go off for a week and the other team comes in. To sort of make sure that if a team gets taken out for a week or 10 days for quarantine, there's a backup team that can step up and do the work. It also helps to sort of reduce the salaries and keep everybody rather just at lower income. And then communicate through to, I see the same thing where people at first sort of want to know that you do COVID regulations to keep things intact, but they don't really care once they're here. It's like, well, we're free now. We're out of our isolation in Cape Town. We're nice now. We want to do stuff. Yeah. But at the same time, I find that people are very forgiving if we just say, well, sorry, none of the norms. It is also because the rate has been so drastically reduced.
Sure.
Our big concern was the minute you usually go for a lower rate, you get people that necessarily expects more because they're not used to a certain market.
Sure.
And we've luckily so far, touch wood, not seen too much of that. And in South Africa, a big part of the problem is the continuous training of staff on the hygiene protocol, because they don't really deeply understand the notion of how the virus works. The staff training is not a once-off process. I find that we got to keep on refreshing the staff on what is the alcohol-based sanitizer to clean the surfaces with, and how to use it.
I mean, in other
Sorry, Schalk, just quickly, Mike. The masks, when I left South Africa in June, we weren't allowed to wear those paper masks. Remember, it was all for medical only. And if that's still in place, I tell you something, try and work in 40-degree heat with a mask. It is horrendous. Insane. I mean, everything starts to do this.
Absolutely.
Staff, they've got to relax that.
Yeah. What they have relaxed. What we use on the property now is normally sort of just a bandana over the mouth, and then we've actually got those perspex or plastic sort of covers that go over the face. That's effectively, I think, more useful, because we did find the masks just didn't work, and
you can't expect someone to wear that. And listen, I left on a repatriation flight, which went to KLM, went from Amsterdam to Reunion Island to fuel, and then South Africa picked us up. and then back again. So it was an 18-hour flight. Those damn masks on. Oh my gosh! I actually, I got off the plane feeling quite sick. Actually.
Yes.
So for staff to
absolutely.
use the heat, I mean, the heat's the problem. You still look cold.
That's it.
40-degree heat trying to clean a property.
Different story.
Yeah.
I've got a funny story on the mask. I was chatting to some of the staff that were off for 2 weeks, asking how does it look on the taxis getting from Knysna. The townships are sort of above the town, and it's quite a process to sort of drive down into town to do shopping. And I asked, well, what does it look like on the taxis? And he says, no, it's fine. I said, has everybody got masks? He says, no, not everybody's got masks, but the taxi driver got very clever because he bought 15 masks. And if you want to get into the taxi and you don't have a mask, he gives you one and you give it back when you're done, and then he uses it again on the next person.
Oh my word.
Yeah, I think just picking up on your earlier thing about continuous training, I think, there's been quite a few good ideas going around in different industries, and people have pivoted, but a lot of people have failed on the actual execution. Dischem, I'm sorry to use names, is one. I mean, they just to get into Dischem, certainly in East London, was an hour wait. And they started promoting the delivery service, which was great. So if you had a script lodged with them, you'd phone them and they would organize a delivery. But as more and more people joined that service, you couldn't get through on the telephone, and nobody seemed to know. So you try for 3 days and you wouldn't be able to get through. So, I mean, I moved my scripts to Berea Pharmacy, which is an independent pharmacy. And they'd put on another 3 motorbikes and pulled in another 3 telephone operators. And it would just work seamlessly. So I guess coming out of your ivory tower and getting onto the floor and actually observing and seeing how things work is important. And I mean, I think, Skulk, that's how you picked up the fact that, ongoing training is needed in terms of how to handle the virus. And I would imagine an operation like yours, Ian, that's going to be quite interesting too. Your trained managers are going to be...
Like Skulk mentioned about the meals and stuff, I mean, we do high teas in the afternoon. Well, you can't do a high tea in the afternoon with having a sandwich platter and a cake platter.
Yeah.
On a self-serve basis, as a treat for passengers. Everything now needs to be plated and sealed. And, we used to have these beautiful silver dishes with biltong and beautiful nuts and all these nice snacks on our train, where you don't want a person to put their hand into a bowl, even or using a teaspoon to get peanuts out, because, COVID. So all of your snacks now need to be packed the way that you serve meals. So yeah, we're having to look at, operating 24-hour room. It's a service we've always offered. But it's something we have to try to promote a bit more, where, the 24-hour kitchen facilities or services will be made available to people. And whilst we want them to enjoy the facilities on the train, we'll be quite okay if they choose to spend more time inside their cabins and suites and enjoy having some drinks there than being in an ops car. Because we would probably have to look at putting extra seating space onto the train just to be able to create more space between people. Yeah.
I think in closing, one of the other things that I think is a challenge is the attractions that each of your products have. You guys have got excursions, Skulk, the whole Knysna experience, Karen, the villages and the markets and that type of thing. Are you finding that you've lost some of your attractions in your area, or that they've changed fundamentally? And is this impacting on your tourism experience? And is there anything that you can do to support that change in a positive way?
On our side, we obviously sell a journey, and that journey includes an excursion. So we're having to look very carefully at our service providers or the people that we've chosen to offer those experiences to our guests. and ensure that their protocols, cleaning protocols, are in line with ours. We're also at the stage now where, for example, if guests go on a game drive, do we trust the cleaning process to have taken place before that vehicle leaves the lodge to come to the railway, siding to collect our guests in the morning? Or do we now ask them to arrive, a couple of hours earlier so that our team can go and do the cleaning to ensure that that takes place? So it's all stuff that, you're having to look at. So our service providers that we've surrounded ourselves with and have had a good relationship, we will probably continue to work with them. But it would just now mean, going forward, where does our responsibility start and stop? And then obviously also clearly communicate that to our service provider so that we can put our hands on our hearts and say to our agents that sell our train that we've done everything in our power to offer a safe experience for their clients, our passengers, and actually believe it. So there's that whole thing now that we now having to now go and speak to that group of people and say, before we start operating, we need to be on the same page. What does your cleaning process entail? We think it should include foggers. We should think it includes this, hand wipes that people can decide if they want to clean the seating area themselves, after deep cleaning has taken place. So yeah, so there's that protocol that now needs to happen, and be established.
Go.
We sit with similar issues that people used to come to Knysna and go to the Elephant Park and go here and there in 3 other places, and a lot of them are still simply just not open yet to the public. And there's definitely far less restaurants, and they close earlier in the evening and things like that. So part of our approach has been what we call a curated stay. Okay. So the room is very basic and very cheap, but then the girls that all used to be the receptionists have all been put in an office right next door with phones and emails, and they contact everybody that books and say, hello, curated stay, you're coming, I see you coming for 3 nights. Can I explain a little bit? This is the food scenario. Can we interest you in getting a braai out in your garden? Can we put a menu together for food? There's a hike that's going down to the ravine. How old are your kids? Would you want to do the hike? What would you? So to try and tailor make every experience for people. And what we see in most cases, those girls start upselling. Yes. So now people that would have just come for the weekend, okay, yeah, I'll take 2 days off and actually come for 4 days, and then we'll do this and that and add this meal. And you've got a potjie on that night. Yes. We'll stay longer and we'll. So then you eventually start building a product that looks very different, but we still manage to sell something that makes a memorable experience that is connected to the name of Pazula, even if it doesn't have the luxury services that you used to get on the raw chocolate on your bed for turn down service.
Sure. Yeah. Karen?
Well, being in France, of course, things have sort of continued more or less the same, except it's the markets one's going to be careful of. But, in the past, in summer, we have something called the night markets, where people arrive with their food van and everybody sets up around the square. That's a lot of the villages have stopped. I took the opportunity to work at a private one where, people are coming in with their masks and we serve them their wine and their food, and then off they go and they sit at social distancing. So it's a much smaller night market, but it nevertheless is still offering that kind of service. At this point in time, people in France are behaving. So in our area anyway, not in the bigger centers, so I see. But it's all got to be completely and carefully controlled. For example, where I was working on Monday, we didn't offer wine by the glass. You buy the whole bottle, that kind of thing, because then, and you open it in front of the people, and then they go and take their cups and off they go. So that kind of thing, it's changed. It's not like it would have been last summer. But at the end of the day, our guests can still go paddling down the river, and now that's where I've got to rely on their cleaning policies and that kind of thing. So we've all got to do our part as service providers in this industry here. Otherwise, it's very easy, they just close you down. So, but it's not easy, eh?
No.
When you're relying on other people, because I'm a bit of a control freak. I like to know that everything's in its place, but you've got to rely on those other people who are out there, whether it's a restaurant or whatever, that they are following the same protocol as you are. And I mean, they seemingly are, and let me tell you, those restaurants are full, hey, with the tables in between. So people are still going out. It's not like in South Africa, where it's not happening, but they definitely mainly outside, which we can because it's hot. But the other night we had an almighty storm and we went to a pub for a French lesson and we sat indoors. But again, you know, we sat at a table and there was no one near us. And there was a few other tables. So obviously there are fewer patrons, so which is probably a good thing. So
yeah. Yeah, look, I mean, I think the industry is going through huge challenges, and I really want to thank you for giving up of your time. I know you're very busy and you're trying to manage all these changes. It's been great chatting, and thanks for your insight. You know, hopefully people will benefit from it. Yes, absolutely. Take care, everyone. And
Thanks.
Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.